I just watched Linus's 30-day iPhone challenge, and I've got to say, most of what he calls issues just aren't. The fundamental flaw with Linus's iPhone experience is he's so used to how things work on Android that anytime something worked differently on iOS, he deemed it broken. But Apple has never claimed it just works exactly like your Android. So after watching his video multiple times, I found all his complaints could be broken down into 4 distinct categories. Not actually an issue, might be a bug, here's a fix, and finally, okay, you've got a point. The majority of issues fall under the first category, so let's start there.
Let's start with how slow the device feels. Like the animations, they're beautiful, but I don't need to see it every time I unlock my phone. Guys, I've got urgent Facebook Marketplace doom scrolling to do.
Personally, I find this one a little insane. I can understand how beautiful animations may seem slower than no animation at all, but really it's not. You don't have to wait for the animation to end to start interacting with the phone. I can open up Facebook Marketplace before that gorgeous animation even finishes and immediately start doom scrolling.
I can't get to the home screen without physically swiping the screen after authenticating, and then it's animation time again. Just get out of my way and let me use my phone.
There's 2 problems with this. Firstly, it's not true. You can swipe up before it authenticates. So if you're pulling your phone out of your pocket, you can swipe up as you're doing so, and then as soon as the phone authenticates, boom, it's animation time again. But the larger problem with this issue is instant unlock completely defeats the purpose of the lock screen. With every notification acting as an app launcher, you have your widgets, customizable controls, live activities. There's just so much on the lock screen that if every time you took out your phone and went right to the home screen, it would actually lead to a slower and worse overall user experience.
But none of that had the desired effect of getting the fluff out of my way so I can just use my phone.
Here, Linus is demonstrating just how quickly he can unlock his Android device, but now that we know you can swipe up as soon as you pick up your phone, let's compare the unlocking speeds.
But none of that had the desired effect of getting the fluff out of my way so I can just use my phone. So efficient. Which brings me to a pretty big subject. Going back on iOS is objectively bad. They seem to be big fans of the swipe in from the left, but they only use it just enough to trick you into thinking that it should work all the time, and then bam! An app hits you with clicking on the top left like my old iPhone 4, or canceling in the top right like this.
Okay, next up is the lack of a universal back button, which I've heard many Android users complain about, but I've never actually felt the need to have one. Linus only mentions the swipe to go back feature and that it's inconsistent, but I don't fully agree. In one of his examples, he shows the swipe not working on a news article, and then suddenly working, and then not working again. I was able to replicate this experience when swiping from the middle of the screen, but the swipe to go back has always been from the very edge of the screen. Then, once you're back in this view, where exactly are you trying to go back to? If it's a different section of the app, just tap that particular tab, or, and this is a crucial one, if you're trying to go back to a different app you were just in, swipe along the very bottom of the screen. Linus never mentioned this gesture at all, but it's extremely useful for going back to not just your most recent app, but any of your currently open apps. Beyond this, in iOS 26, they're actually improving the swipe to go back gesture to work anywhere on the screen. As for the search controls, I mean, that's somewhat fair. But even better news for Linus, in iOS 26, it looks like search bars will now be moved to the bottom of the screen and will even have an X button right above the keyboard. So there's no need for some sort of universal back button here.
Maybe a little doom scrolling will calm me down, and oh boy. If you want the long version of this rant, you can check out the WAN show from a couple of weeks ago. But the TLDR is, when I flick my finger in my news feed or on Reddit, I expect the screen to move at the same speed that my finger moved and then decelerate from there. I do not expect it to move at whatever relaxed, chill pace that some Apple focus group has determined is the most aesthetically pleasing in order to hide their 60 Hz refresh rate.
Okay, so I have several problems with this one. First, the iPhone to me does have true inertia scrolling. It's extremely responsive to my finger, and how I move it dictates how the content is manipulated. Android devices, by comparison, defy physics and don't take true inertia into account, and it has a much more jumpy effect. So when it comes to scrolling a newsfeed, if you're actually trying to browse the content, I find the scrolling speeds of the iPhone way more natural. But again, here's where Linus's lack of experience with iOS hurts him. First, if you've used an iPhone long enough, you'll learn that a quick, rapid swipe of your finger moves the content a lot faster. so you get used to doing a bunch of these short bursts to quickly scroll through content when needed. But then there's one other feature that makes this whole side-by-side comparison you did completely pointless. Whenever you want to scroll back to the top of any list or page, all you have to do is tap the top of the screen.
Particularly this new camera button here. Out of the box, I kept accidentally hitting it, only to have a user point out to me that I could configure it to require a double click. Huh, well that's super cool, I thought. I wonder what other apps I could make it No. Camera and camera adjacent only.
Again, this is not an issue. Most Android phones don't even have a dedicated action button, let alone a camera control button. Having a physical, dedicated button that allows you to pull up the camera at any time, no matter what state your phone is in, is a good thing. They came out with this button less than a year ago. It's called the camera control. You can't just complain, they added a dedicated camera button that only does camera!
Why? I can't change the size of the app grid? I'm stuck at 4 wide?
I almost put this as, okay, you've got a point, because it seems like such an easy thing to add, and Apple has been slow to add customization options to the home screen. But after thinking about it, I don't think they will, nor should they. Because 1, it's not actually an issue, and 2, it would completely break how their widgets are currently optimized. When you tap and hold on an app icon, you can have up to 4 display options. To keep it as an app icon, to make it a 2x2 widget, or a 4x2 widget, or a 4x4 widget. Adding in a 5th or 6th column of apps would ruin this very polished experience. Okay, now let's quickly address the issues that I think can be categorized simply as bugs.
When I was migrating in the first place, Apple's Move to iOS app failed twice before actually working, and even then, it basically just copied SMS, photos, and WhatsApp.
I don't have much to add here other than copying messages, contacts, and photos is not nothing. That's probably the biggest thing most people care about when they get a new phone. Obviously, having all your apps installed too is ideal, but clearly that didn't happen for you. So all I can say is this could have been completely avoided if you only used iPhone.
I ran into this problem while rearranging apps. I think maybe the ones I place manually might behave differently than the ones that are automatically placed. Sometimes it just gets confused.
I tried recreating your setup and couldn't replicate the issue. The only time I ever have this issue now is when trying to create a folder or add an app to a folder. Sometimes you just gotta really sneak up on it in order to get it to work. The current experience seems to be if you move an app to any of the apps immediately surrounding it, they'll just switch places. And for all other apps, they'll either shift up or down to get out of the way. Also, just a quick tip for anyone who hates rearranging apps. After you select an app, you can tap on other apps and then move them all at the same time, and they'll be arranged based on the order you selected them. This segues nicely into the next section, here's a fix.
Let's talk about rotation locks. Now we use iPhones as our teleprompters here at Linus Media Group. And because we can't lock them in landscape mode, we have to train all of our camera operators in a maneuver that we call the dip to reorient the screen.
All right, so first things first, an area of agreement. The iPhone absolutely should just have an orientation lock, just like the iPad does. It shouldn't be restricted to portrait orientation only. However, I do have a fix in the meantime for your teleprompter workflow. It's a feature called Guided Access. You'll find it in Settings, Accessibility, and then Guided Access. You can even set this as an accessibility shortcut, meaning it can be enabled with a triple click of the sleep-wake button. Once you enable it, you'll have the option to disable certain areas of the screen and turn off certain functions of the device. So in the case of a teleprompter app, maybe you don't want any accidental presses of the volume or side buttons, nor do you want motion enabled, but perhaps you do still want the ability to use the touchscreen and access the keyboard. So now, once you have the teleprompter in the proper orientation, enable guided access, and you'll be able to tilt the phone however you want, and it'll even be impossible to accidentally close out of the app. The only downside to all this is it does require a passcode to turn the feature off.
You're welcome.
Let me address one last comment Linus has on orientation lock before moving on.
I came across Jetpack Joyride, and I immediately fired it up. I played it for a second, then I put my phone down to make a note about something, and when I picked it back up, the game was upside down. I gave it the old wiggle, I tried to reorient it, but no. It would only work in one of the 2 possible landscape orientations. What the heck, Apple? These kinds of arbitrary distinctions, like which way is the approved landscape orientation, assuming I'm allowed to be in landscape at all, do nothing for your user, they do nothing for your profits. So why?
This issue is completely self-inflicted by the app developer. When designing an iPhone or iPad app, developers can check off which orientations the app can be used in. So it appears Jetpack Joyride has opted for their app to only work in landscape left. Why? I don't know. But should they have the option to do this? Sure.
If you've never touched Android, this is gonna blow your freaking mind. No matter what I'm doing, if I touch the volume button, I can adjust my ringtone, my notifications, my media, and my system sounds. The fact that that doesn't exist, iOS users should be rioting in the streets.
Hey, so I had a lot of trouble on where to put this one. Originally, I thought maybe it's not an issue because most iPhone users are like me and put their phone on silent and never ever turn it off. But then I thought I found a fix in sounds and haptics by turning on the change with buttons option. I figured so long as you pause your media, the volume buttons would adjust the ringer. But it turns out that's not always the case. So I'm just gonna file this one under the next category. Okay, you've got a point.
In the past, iOS had an account section in the settings app where you could centrally manage and sync your different accounts for email, calendar, contacts, all that kind of stuff. That seems to be gone now, but I work for a G Suite organization, so I'm gonna need my Google Calendar to tell me what it is that I'm doing today. This is where past experience with iOS got in my way. The account setting was gone, and I couldn't find an obvious way to add an account in the calendar app.
Linus brings up a very good point here about accounts. If you haven't set up any accounts for mail, contacts, calendars, or notes, most users would assume opening up the Mail, Contacts, Calendar, or Notes app would be a good place to set that up. And yet, that's only the case for the Mail app and only for the first account you set up. There used to be a dedicated account section in the settings to manage all these, but now you have to scroll down to the Apps section of settings, find the specific app you're looking for, and then from there you can add your accounts and choose whether to sync Mail, Contacts, Calendars, and Notes. So I'm not really going to argue with Linus on this one. But then again, if you're working for a G Suite organization, why aren't you just downloading the Google versions of all these apps?
Boom. Roasted.
The iPhone keyboard is missing so many things that I completely take for granted as basic functions of an Android keyboard. For example, while the iOS keyboard does let you hold down a key in order to modify your letters with whatever diacritical mark you need, Android lets you use the same technique to access numbers and common punctuation from the first layer of the keyboard.
Alright, so the iPhone keyboard. Having modifier keys that give quick access to numbers and special characters is 100% something I would welcome on iOS. In fact, they already do this on iPads, and I would love for it to work the exact same way. You just swipe down on a key to get the number or special character. But I will say, if you've used an iPhone long enough, this really isn't as big of a deal as it may seem. All the most common punctuation marks are in this first row right here, and the muscle memory to tap the 1, 2, 3 button and then the special character you need becomes second nature very quickly, almost to the point that I'm not even sure a modifier key would be faster, at least at first. Like anything else, you have to get used to it, and then it becomes something you do without even thinking about it.
Core features are missing, like the aforementioned long press tuning, and even the ability to resize the keyboard. Do you know you can't resize the keyboard? Why?
This one really surprised me, and I think it really comes down to the heart of the whole issue here. Android and iPhone are two different platforms with two different philosophies. Android has always prioritized customization and encouraged a huge diversity of form factors and device types, in which case I can see how something like this is appealing. But as an iPhone user, I have never once felt the urge to resize the keyboard. What am I going to do? Make it smaller, larger, have it floating in the middle of the screen? No thanks. I don't even want the option. It makes sense on the iPad, sort of, but if you want a smaller keyboard, press and hold the globe icon and shift it left or right for one-handed use. Turn your phone landscape if you want it bigger. Anything beyond that, no. And that's Apple's design philosophy. It just works, not it just works, however you want it to work. Now, I doubt I've done enough to get you to switch sides again, Linus, but perhaps I'll have better luck with the Mac. I'll be making another video just like this one, responding to all of Linus's issues with the Mac, so be sure to subscribe for that. In the meantime, if you want to learn about the #1 iPhone feature keeping me from switching to Android, check out this video right here. I'm Nick Bradley. Thank you so much for watching.